Hi everyone, welcome to a Sunday GMAT Club live session. I'm here with Bharat and we're going to talk about his GMAT success story. But before we jump into all of that, Bharat, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Bharat here. I have 7 years work experience, and the first five have been in tech, and the last two I have my own entrepreneurship company. I've been trying to do my MBA since the start of my career. I started with CAT, trying to crack CAT. Then I got too old for CAT. Then I thought, okay, GMAT's my game. So here I am.
Awesome. So, most of you know me by now. I'm Shovik. I'm a recent alum of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. I've started working over here in Seattle, but still love to talk to people who have, really fought with the GMAT, done well with the GMAT, and are on their way to success. So, Bharat is definitely one of them. But you took the GMAT three times, right? You had a pretty long journey with the GMAT. So, tell us about that a little bit. Tell us about the first time you took it. What happened? What went wrong? What do you think you could do better? So let's begin with that.
So 2018 CAT was my last attempt with CAT, and then I thought, okay, I'm getting too old for CAT. It's very competitive to crack CAT. I thought, okay, let me try GMAT. So I enrolled myself in 2019 Jan, I guess, in a coaching institute for GMAT. Then
Right.
we had a 3 month prep for GMAT there. I didn't learn much from there. I just solved questions during the weekends, just during the class. Didn't do much of a prep. And by the time the course ended, I thought that okay, GMAT tests more of critical thinking kind of thing, and this coaching is more of hard work, doing long steps. It didn't help much. I thought self prep would do me good, and I started doing self prep by March 2019, and I did progress much till September. That's when I thought, okay, I have to fix my exam date. So I fixed it 3 months, December, by end of December, and that's when I started picking up my prep. And I started with Manhattan books. Basically, I was pretty weak in English. I thought my verbal needed a bit of strengthening my foundation. I didn't know what was a noun, what is an adjective, things like that. So
Right.
uh, by August or September, that's when I really started studying for GMAT seriously. Given that I had Quant was my strength, so I know most of my time went in preparing for verbal. And by October, I think GMAT Club gave a series of videos. It was really helpful. We had a
Right.
list of 1 or 2 videos per week, one from Veritas Prep, crack verbal inequalities. Those kind of things really helped me. I mean, I knew what an assumption question is, but then those kind of videos, they were the cream on the top of the cake. They told me how to attack an assumption question, like using a negation technique and the inequality session.
Right.
So gmatclub.com really, gave me those useful sessions that could, just put my nose up in front of the race. So yeah.
So, okay, so you started preparing for the GMAT and you were looking at different ways of doing the prep by yourself, right? That is awesome. So, tell me a little bit more about your first GMAT attempt. How was that? And, what did you score and how well did you do and stuff like that?
So when I fixed my exam in September, I mean, it was in September that
Right.
I thought 3 months time would do me good, and I fixed it at 8 a.m. I thought,
Right.
okay, morning would be the best time to give an exam. I thought, okay,
Yeah.
usually but around 11 a.m., 11:30. I thought, okay, the next 3 months I'm going to train myself to wake up at 8 a.m. Well, the first
Right.
month didn't go as well. The second month didn't go as well, and the third month, just 2 weeks before I started waking up at 7, but still, the juices weren't flowing at 8 a.m. So I think that was the biggest mistake, trying to fix the exam slot at a time that is not very suitable for me.
Right.
But most of my prep, even compared, I mean, like from the first prep to second and third, I think there wasn't much of an improvement in my preparation. I mean, like most of the knowledge was at place when I gave my first attempt. The only mistake where I went wrong in the first attempt was the exam scenario. I wasn't practiced for the exam pressure. I succumbed to the pressure
Right.
for during the exam. So I think that's the main fault. That's where I failed in my first attempt.
Hmm. And then what did you change for your next attempt?
Right. So during the first attempt, I had a timing strategy, but I really didn't
Right.
complete the timing strategy in my first attempt. I was scoring above 700 most of the times, and
Yeah.
my during the mocks, and my verbal was also around hovering around verbal 35, 36. But when during the real exam, I had a few disturbances. The next guy constantly humming and things like that. That disturbed me a lot, and I had too much of water during the breaks. And well,
Yeah.
so many external factors came into play there. I realized what are the things that went wrong. First was the morning slot. Second was drinking too much of water. Third was not getting used to the noise cancelling headphones, things like that. And the main strike was that I had a plan, but I didn't follow my plan. I let see the to score high, you have to first battle with your ego. Let your ego down to skip questions, to follow your timing strategy. If you're not
Yeah.
winning over ego, you're not winning over a GMAT exam. So from my first attempt, the next week was three weeks later. So mainly I trained myself to let go of my ego whenever a difficult question comes up. I skipped it. I didn't even read it. I knew a few PNC questions were too difficult, but then I spent my mental energy solving those PNC questions. That was my ego at play. I couldn't let go of a question.
Right.
The same long RC question or a difficult RC question. It is that my ego says you could solve it, but that's when you lose time, you lose your mental energy. So in the next 3 weeks from my first trip, the gap between my first and second, I train myself to let go of my ego. Just skip the questions if I know that I won't be able to. So that's how I
Right.
prepare myself for the second attempt. Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned a lot about, not only having a plan, but also actively working on it, right?
Yeah.
And you also mentioned timing strategy. Share a little bit
Yeah.
about what your timing strategy was and, like how did you actually make it work when you were taking the test?
Yeah, so after my first attempt, I realized that just having a plan wouldn't help me get a good score. So
Right.
I had to follow the timing strategy. And one such timing strategy was given during the Crack Verbal series that was conducted in gmatclub.com. If you could just let me share my screen here, I will show you the timing
Sure.
strategy. So you're able to see my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, these are the countdown timers. One thing is that when we are solving a question, say when we have reached eighth question, people usually calculate that okay, 8 into 2 is 16 times question. Let me subtract 62 minus 16. I should be left with 46 minutes. These are things that you are not supposed to calculate during the exam. Your only aim is
Sure.
to solve the questions, right? So it is better. I thought that it's better to go with a prefix template, and what it shows here is the countdown timers for my timing strategy. So when the timer strikes 46th minute, I should be in ninth question. Say if I'm in seventh question, I quickly solve the seventh question, skip the eighth question, and go to ninth question. It is about making the mistakes, spreading the mistakes throughout the exam rather than concentrating on the first part, second part, the third part. Because when you make 3 mistakes in a row, then you get heavily penalized. So I thought
Right.
spreading mistakes throughout the exam will help me a lot. What I did in the first attempt was that even when the timer struck 46th minute and I'm at seventh question, I let my
Yeah.
ego win all the eighth question. I'm always lagging behind chasing the timer. I was not able to catch up with the timer. So during the second
Right.
and third attempt, I strictly followed with the timing strategy here. But this is just a skeleton. People should try to frame their own timing strategy. I'm good with quant, so I have given myself exactly 2 minutes for 8 questions. So 8 questions take 16 minutes, and 62 minus 16 is
Right.
47. Whereas I start my exam with verbal, and when you start an exam, you are not really in the momentum. Your juices aren't flowing. The exam juices aren't flowing, right? And verbal is also my weak section. So I gave myself a 5 minute extra time when I started. If a verbal question should take 1 minute and 40 seconds to you to finish, but here so it typically should be 50, but I gave myself for 45. Why did I arrive at 45? Because it is through constant practicing through the mocks that I realized I need 5 more extra minutes in the first section of verbal, so that
Right.
I momentum, I could pick up speed at the end of the section. But if someone has a verbal, someone's strength is verbal, then they need not have these 5 minutes. They could just spread it out evenly throughout the section. So during my second and third attempt, I made sure that I stuck to these timing strategies. Sticking to this helped me to spread the errors that I make throughout the exam. And when I check my ESR report, I see that the percentage questions that I got right throughout my exam was almost typically same, 80%, 85% around it. Whereas in my first attempt, it was varying a lot, 60% in the first section,
Hmm.
80% in the second section. It is just that I let my ego win in my first exam. So
Right. Awesome. That sounds great because you sort of it's a lot of self-reflection. I think a lot of people make these mistakes that okay, no, I mean I have to get this question right, regardless of how it impacts their overall score. So thanks for that. That is very helpful. So tell me a little bit more about specific prep. You mentioned you were very confident with your quant abilities. So tell me about your verbal. What did you prep in verbal? What resources did you use? How long did it take? And also like strategies on specific section like sentence question, critical reasoning, etc. So tell us a little bit more about that.
when I started with GMAT, verbal was, I mean, throughout my life, verbal was my weaker part, right? So when I started with the GMAT, I identified my most weaker part, which was RC. So how I started
Right.
prepping for RC was that there is a book, How to Read Better and Faster by Norman Lewis. I thought someone suggested me
Sure.
that book, and that book really helped me a lot. The point is that that book shouldn't be done in a week or two. You should take your time with it, internalize the process with it, how to go about RC. So that book was really helpful to me. So once I
Right.
finished that book, then that's when I got used to gmatclub.com, and there is a GMAT Club RC Butler page that was really helpful. Solving
Right.
two RCs every day. Consistency was the key when it came to preparing for verbal. I used to solve two RCs every day, no matter what. Even if I'm very sleepy, at least I would get all the questions wrong and sleep. So, just being in touch with the prep, being in touch with the practice of doing RC, that helped me a lot. And by the end of the time when I'm ready for my GMAT, I was pretty comfortable with RC. RC became my
Right.
favorite part with compared to SC and CR. And SC mainly dealt with grammar. Initially, it was very daunting for me, going back to nouns, adjectives, verbs, and things like that. But Manhattan's foundation book really helped me there. It helped me to strengthen my foundations, know what it is. And by the time I finished my foundation book and read the explanations for the questions in the gmatclub.com, when I'm able to understand the explanation, I felt more confident. Right, I have my basics in place. It's just that I'm not utilizing my basics properly. That's where I need to work upon. Sometimes if I'm not understanding an explanation in gmatclub.com, then I think, okay, say for example, I'm not understanding what a participle is, what's a participle ed is, then okay, so this is something that I haven't read upon. Let me go back, touch upon it in the foundations book. And that's how I improve my SE. It is by getting the questions wrong. Whenever I get a question
Right.
wrong, there's usually some new concept involved in it. Say something like a Sanam Brown that I didn't know before, something like that. So, unlike the OG has a comprehensive list of questions that cover all the topics. So it is a pretty good chance that if you haven't covered it during your prep, you would definitely stumble upon
Hmm.
such concepts and start studying. So my prep usually depended on this belief that definitely I would get a question wrong if I haven't covered it in my prep. So that's how I
Right.
did CR, SE. The preparation for CR mostly was derived from a preparation from RC. It is about reading through the explanation, reading through the question stem to understanding what they are trying to say.
Right.
Initially, my mind used to wander whenever I read an RC or a CR. I'm not a big fan of taking notes, but then I came across a post in GMAT Club that said that you don't usually refer your notes, but taking notes will help you stay grounded with the question. Your mind, it wouldn't allow your mind to wander. So taking notes for CR really helped me, and identifying the conclusion really helped me there. If anyone is struggling with CR, I think identifying a conclusion, arriving at a concrete conclusion would really help them a lot. So most of the questions that I got wrong, I didn't have a solid conclusion framed in my mind. So once I identified that, okay, this is where I'm getting wrong. If I had identified a conclusion properly, then I would get the question right. So it is identifying where you're taking a wrong turn. I took a wrong turn in
Right.
identifying the conclusion. So that's how I prep for.
Awesome. So by the way, totally agree. So I think taking notes, people think that taking notes is going to give them things to look at after some of the question, but it's more about being an active reader. And I
Yeah,
think when you're taking notes, sort of forced to go into that process, and that helps. As I took notes for RC and CR in my tests, and I think that was a very helpful exercise to actually
definitely.
force myself to write the conclusion or force myself to guess what the answer could be before even looking at the answer choices. So those strategies were very helpful. So awesome. Great to know about your verbal stuff. You told me that you were confident with quant, but tell me a little bit more about, even though you were confident, what did you do with quant that helped you get over that finish line?
So when I started with quant prep, I thought the syllabus for GMAT would involve me memorizing a lot of formulas, and I didn't have any problem with that. So learning formulas, memorizing formulas as an Indian was a pretty easy thing that comes to you naturally. But as I went through my
Right.
prep, I realized that it isn't much about memorizing formulas. You have to be strong with your foundations. It is the nuances in the foundations. It is the nuances in the concepts that the GMAT tries to test you upon, tries to get your question wrong. As you said, just like in RC, you should be an active reader when you are reading a question for quant as well. Sometimes at the
Right.
beginning of a question, you have uh, the x is an integer. Sometimes at the end of a question, they ask you, what is the value of integer x? You wouldn't expect it at the end. So you have to be a really active reader in quant. And these are the kind of things that I started picking up early in my prep. Okay, so initially I thought it would test me on formulas, but this isn't about formulas. It is about knowing the basics of concepts and stuff like that. But I didn't really. There wasn't really much of a trouble when I started with my quant prep, and even in my first attempt, I scored a Q50. But during my second attempt, that's when I bombed my quant. I got a Q47 during the exam itself.
Mm,
I found out that when I clicked next, I realized that okay, I know it was really a matter of me being absent-minded there, not really taking note, not really taking cognizance of the small things that are given in the question, like what is the value of integer x, and x is not
right.
zero is with the first part, but when I'm solving a DS question and arriving at an answer, I'm not considering the constraint anymore. Things like that.
Right.
I don't know how I jumped through these hurdles in the first attempt because I didn't really get that much of a nuances testing kind of questions in my first attempt. I guess the second attempt really made me aware of where I'm going wrong. And a lot
Right.
of mocks that I took from these prep companies, the 700 plus questions, they really tested you on knowing the formula of, say, for example, hexagon, area of a hexagon. Really, GMAT doesn't test you on knowing the formulas for a difficult question. What it really tests
Right.
you is just the basic concepts, all the nooks and corners of a basic concept, if you're able to sweep the floor completely, leaving no dust when it comes to number properties. It is those kind of 700 level plus questions that GMAT really tests. So I was searching for such a mock, and then I subscribed myself to gmatclub.com's quant mocks, and those were really
Right.
great. Whenever I went through those mocks, I constantly say I took a 31 question quiz. I constantly found myself making 8 silly mistakes. I knew the concept, I knew the formulas, I knew how to proceed about it, but just that I missed, taking cognizance of the nuances that is given in the question. And GMAT Club
Right.
really exploits that, it exploits those kind of questions, and it is a great question bank for anyone aiming for a high scoring quant. It is a great tool for you to reduce your silly mistakes. You have thousands of questions there, and definitely it will help you be more aware of where the corner is, where you have to make a U-turn, things like that. So credits to the makers of these questions.
I agree. I think there are two kinds of quant questions. I think one is made really challenging because it's a challenging concept.
Right.
Um, and there's this another type of GMAT questions which are pretty easy. The only reason it is hard is because it sort of forces the student or whoever's asking the question to actually read between the lines. Like, for example, the things that you mentioned, like x is an integer or x is a whole number or X is a positive number. Those preconditions used to trip me up a lot because I was careless. And I think GMAT Club Tests does a good job with having a ton of those questions where you are pretty easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I'm going to solve this equation and find an answer, and that's it. That's
Right.
not going
Yeah.
to work. So yeah, no, it was very helpful for me as well. So tell
Just
me a little bit.
another thing that I wanted to add here is that
Yeah, go ahead.
uh, sometimes questions give you 2x equal to x, and some people just strike x on both sides, not knowing that x can be zero there as well.
Yeah,
I said
yeah,
there are two types of questions. One is this kind, nuances, and the other is a difficult concept. So definitely there is a
yeah.
good chance that you will get tested on a difficult concept in the real exam, and it is good to have a 3 to 4 questions that you are deliberately skipping. And one such thing that I missed to mention during when I shared my timing strategies, when I went into the exam, I had 4 questions in each section, be it quant or verbal. I will definitely skip it. If it is a difficult concept, I will just give a 5 second glance at the question, and if I
Right.
think that I won't be able to answer it, I have a less chance of getting the question right. I'm definitely going to skip it.
Hmm.
When I share this strategy to my friends, they are surprised. What, don't you even read the question for 30 seconds? The thing is that when you read the question for 30 seconds, you are already invested in that question. Your ego is even more stronger for you to solve that question. It will force you to solve the question. And the more time you spend, it is like you're double betting on that question, and it gets you stressed.
Yeah.
So I prefer with going 3 to 4 questions that I'm deliberately going to skip it. And the I mean, like, the level of instinct that you should have, like which questions to skip, which questions that you should solve, that only comes by practice through your mocks. Whenever you are
Hmm.
giving your mocks, you skip a question, and when you review it, and you see that okay, this was an easy question that shouldn't be skipped. That's when you fine tune your skipping strategies there. So yeah, as you said, there are two kinds of questions. One is a great challenging question, and you should be able to identify that question when it comes to your exam and skip it. You should be ready to skip it. It is not a battle between you and GMAT. It is a battle between you and your ego to skip the question.
Awesome. So, okay, so that's mostly all my questions. We have about 7 minutes left. I'm trying to see if I can get some questions from people who are watching. So the first question was what was the difference between the different attempts that you took for the GMAT, and how did your score change over time?
So the first attempt I scored a 690, and that was mainly
Right.
because I found the verbal, and I knew that like my verbal in my actual GMAT was 32, but I usually score
Hmm.
around 36 or 35, and I had this annoying feeling in me, just to getting an average would be good. I knew I could do better. Maybe it was because of the 8 a.m. slot that and the verbal was the
Hmm.
first that I took. So my mind wasn't in my optimum performance level. So I definitely wanted a afternoon slot just to improve my verbal score, just to get it in my average sweet spot. And when I gave it in
Right.
my second attempt, verbal was in my sweet spot. I scored a verbal 38. In 3 weeks, you
Right.
can't make much of a 6 point increase. So it was mainly because of the morning slot that I messed up my verbal. But quant, I took it easy in my second attempt. I bombed quant. So I scored a Q47 in quant. So when you take both of these tests, I have bombed one section and performed well in the other section. So my third attempt was mainly concentrating on combining the best of these two exams. So in my third attempt, I tried my best. I booked an afternoon slot, and GMAT Club Quant has helped me to know the nuances. And
Right.
I tried to make all the planets in line just to get my best performance during the exam. So during my
Right.
third attempt, it was Q50 and the verbal 40. It was a 2 point increase though, but it isn't considerable. So before my first attempt, all my preparation was completely in place. It is just that I bombed during the exam. It is that I didn't have enough exam practice. The time pressure
Hmm.
got. So it was 690 to 740 from my first to third attempt. Yes.
Awesome. So another question on did you have an error log, and how did you log your errors, and how did you go back to them? Somebody's asking to screen share your error log. That's going to be challenging. You don't have to do that. But why don't you talk us through that process?
Yep, Erlog is an important process for any candidate trying to crack GMAT.
Right.
It tries to, maybe you missed the percentage question in the beginning of your prep, and by the end of your prep you see that you are picking up in percentage question. That's a good sign. Whereas if you're still not
Right.
picking up in a percentage question, then that's an area of concern that you could work upon. In the beginning of your prep, you might just give excuses that okay, you didn't know the formula, and you would be okay with it. But still, if that that issue is there in the end of the prep, the error log helps you
Hmm.
identify it. But basically, I didn't use it. It is a mistake on my part. Maybe it could have made my prep a little bit faster, a little bit easier. But I still noted questions that I got wrong. It is just that I didn't review my error log. But I would recommend anyone to maintain an error log and do review with
Right.
time.
Got it. Awesome. Questions around, let's see. Were you able to finish the verbal section completely? How much time did you have left for your last question?
Well, that was a very good question. So, I shared my timing strategy. I was able to stick to my timing strategy for the first three parts. In the fourth part, I was lacking by two questions. I was lagging from my own
Hmm.
timing strategy. So, say for example, when the clock struck 5th minute, I'd be in 30th question. I was in 20th question. So I had to skip two questions and one other question. So I skipped three questions in the last part of my exam. And when
Right.
I saw ESR, it had 50% right and 50% wrong in the last questions. But still, that didn't affect my verbal score much because the other errors were spread throughout the exam. I still scored a verbal 40. So I think it is imperative for anyone to spread their errors throughout the exam. So basically, I
Right.
skipped on the 3 to 4 questions deliberately. Yes, and the two of them lied in the last part of my exam.
Got it. Got it. And was the same thing for quant as well? Were you able to stick to your timing in quant?
Yep, and the quant I skipped the first question in the first section. So it was my eighth question. It tested something related to GP, but then
Yeah.
I skipped the three questions. There was a difficult PNC question as well, a difficult combination question as well. So yeah, I did skip three to four questions in my quant as well deliberately. Yeah, didn't even read the question, just straight away click next. Knew that this is a difficult question to solve. Spent 5 minutes to know what the question is. Skipped it.
Right. Awesome. I have one more question for you, but before that, I want to remind people to like the video. Liking the video helps us reach more people, and also subscribe to the channel. There's a ton of videos coming up next week and the week after. We have videos from GMAT and MBA experts, and also these videos seem to have helped Bharat and a ton of other people. So it might help you too. So keep subscribed so that you get a notification when this video runs out. Also, just wanted to remind people that Heroes of Timer is starting next week. So if you didn't know, I did a quick video on Heroes of Timer yesterday. It's a big competition, and there's a chance to win a ton of different prizes for your team and yourself. So make sure you register and know all the rules and are prepped to answer the question. So just wanted to give people a friendly reminder of how things are going to go tomorrow. Awesome. So last question for you, Bharat. If somebody was in your shoe, like for example, Yashwant has 10 days to go for his GMAT. What would you recommend before the test date?
Well, if he has an error log, he should definitely go through the error log, try to see if he can tighten a few goals there before the exam. But 10 days before
Right.
the exam, you can't prepare much. No, you can't build much on your study prep. What you can do is get accustomed to the time pressure. Take a few
Hmm.
mocks. Just to put yourself under pressure. Maybe skip three. Deliberately skip 3 to 4 questions. Perfect. Make your timing strategy perfect. Don't
Right.
take two mocks in the next 10 days. I would suggest one mock in a couple of days. And a day before the exam, take a complete rest. Don't do anything with regard to your prep. Just calm your mind. The one main thing that I suggest you to do is perfect your timing strategy and
Right.
gather the courage to stick to your timing strategy on the day of the exam. That's what you should concentrate on.
Awesome. Well, Bharat, thank you so much for spending your time
Yeah.
with us. All the
I'm
best
sorry,
for your
Sahil,
MBA application.
one thing
Yeah,
to
yeah. Go ahead.
us. So I see that a lot of people don't take their mocks at all. They just keep it till the end of the exam, just a 1 month before they take GMAT 1 to 6, almost continuously. Guys, I was there. I didn't take my mocks for the first 4 months during my prep. It is the fear of failure. It is the fear of getting a low score that stops you from getting a lowest, stops you from taking the mock. So it only affects you. I suggest you to take the mock, face your fear. It's only when you know what is your band, you can improve on it. Don't postpone the failure to a later date, and then
Yeah.
you can recover from it. So take your mocks regularly. Don't leave them till the day of the exam. Yeah, thanks a lot. Sorry, that was something that I wanted to say.
Awesome. No, I totally agree. I think you should take your mock. It's a way to assess yourself, right? So it's not nobody's gonna know how much you scored. So
Right.
it's a test for yourself. So awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Bharat, for spending your time with us. All the best for your applications. You've come a long way, and you've conquered your GMAT journey. And please be in touch. Be on the forums. Help other people. I think that's how the community is sort of built. But thanks again for your time, and I hope you have a great. Wait, it's Sunday night right now, so I hope you have a great next week.
Thanks a lot, Sorik, and wish you all the best too.
Awesome. Thanks, Bharat. Bye. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye.